The air was suffocating as Hannah stood at the altar, the cold stone beneath her feet mirroring the chill settling in her chest. Her heart pounded with each passing second, a constant reminder of her helplessness. She glanced sideways at Varek, the man she was forced to marry. His expression was as cold and unyielding as the towering stone walls surrounding them. He did not look at her with affection, only with the calculated coldness of a man accustomed to command. Hannah's hands trembled in the tight grip of her gown, each breath harder to take than the last. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this, never in a hall full of strangers, under the weight of a promise made in blood. She wanted to scream, to run, but there was no escape now. Her family had been destroyed, her world shattered, and now she was to become his, bound by magic, fate, and a twisted contract. Varek turned his gaze to her, locking eyes with her, and for a brief flickering second she saw something, perhaps remorse, or perhaps it was simply his amusement at her suffering. "Hannah, you will be mine, and no one will stand in my way." Varek's voice was a low growl, but it reverberated in her chest like the echo of doom. Could she ever escape him? Could she find the courage to fight? Or was she truly lost? As the ceremony continued, Hannah's thoughts spiraled into chaos. Each word spoken by the officiant felt like a weight added to the chains around her heart. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but her body refused to move. Varek stood silently beside her, his expression unreadable, like stone. Hannah could feel the oppressive air, thick with the magic surrounding the bond that was about to bind her to him forever. She had heard the rumors about the dark pact, the one that tied her to Varek in a way that could never be undone. His power was immense, and she was just a pawn, a tool in his ruthless quest for domination. But what choice did she have? If she fought, she would be destroyed. And yet, standing beside him, she felt a spark of something deep within, something that refused to bend completely to the darkness. Could she possibly survive this? Her mind raced, but the ceremony moved on, unrelenting. The crowd's murmurs like the background noise of her own impending doom. The vows were only a formality, a prelude to the life she was about to lose. Would she ever be free of him? Or was she already lost? The vows were spoken, and with each word, Hannah felt the cold grip of fate tighten. Her heart beat faster as the final words approached. Varek's voice echoed in her ears, but all she could focus on was the sound of her own breath. She had expected this moment to feel like the end, but now it felt like something else, something far worse. Her gaze flickered to the door, but she knew it was too late. The world outside would never be the same. The officiant turned to her, and Hannah's throat tightened. She was about to say those words, "I do," but they felt like a betrayal to herself, to everything she had ever believed in. Could she go through with it? Could she truly give herself to Varek, the man who had destroyed her life? As her mind raced, Varek's hand suddenly gripped hers, sharp and unyielding. His touch was a promise, but not of love, of power, of control. Hannah felt a surge of defiance stir within her, but it was quickly stifled by the weight of his gaze. She had to stay strong. Somehow, the air seemed to thicken as Hannah uttered the words that would seal her fate. "I do." The phrase felt foreign on her lips, like an alien force twisting her insides. The crowd erupted in muted applause, but Hannah barely heard it. The reality of the situation crashed into her like a wave, pulling her under. She was bound to Varek, no longer the woman she had once been. As they exchanged a quick, almost mechanical kiss, the magic binding them surged. A surge of heat and power that burned through her veins. She shivered but couldn't pull away, not with the weight of the curse settling around her. Every cell in her body screamed for release, for freedom, but it was too late. She was his now. Varek held her tightly, his expression unreadable, and for a fleeting moment, Hannah felt a pang of sorrow for what was lost. But there was also something else in her, something that felt like rebellion, though she knew not where it would lead. Could she still fight? Was there any part of her left that hadn't been swallowed by this cruel fate? The ceremony was over, but the war within her had only just begun. The hall was silent now, the oppressive weight of their union settling heavily around them. Hannah could feel Varek's presence beside her, like an anchor to a dark, stormy sea. Her mind raced with thoughts of escape, but every plan seemed futile. She had no allies here. The life she had known was gone, replaced by the cold reality of her new existence. As they walked out of the hall, the doors closed behind them with a resounding thud, sealing Hannah into a world she could never return from. The sunlight outside was blinding, but Hannah's heart felt darker than ever. She had hoped for a glimmer of hope, but it was nowhere to be found. Varek's hand brushed against hers again, but this time it felt different. He wasn't simply holding her. He was marking her. A deep, unsettling part of her wanted to pull away, but the weight of the magic that bound them held her fast. What had she done? The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, but Hannah felt like she was moving alone in a vast, empty world. Could she ever break free from this fate, or was she truly lost to him forever? The wind howled through the trees, the night air thick with danger. Hannah's heart raced as she sprinted through the forest, branches snapping underfoot. She could feel Varek's presence behind her, his pursuit relentless. His voice cut through the night, calm and cold. "You cannot escape me, Hannah." A rush of fear hit her as she glanced over her shoulder. The moonlight barely lit the path ahead, shadows twisting with every step. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep running. The forest seemed to close in around her, the sounds of Varek's footsteps growing louder. Her mind screamed at her to keep going, to escape, but the heavy weight of the magic binding them pulled at her. She stumbled, catching herself just in time. His laughter echoed through the trees, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. She had to make it. She had to find a way out of this. But what if there was no escape? Varek's voice was closer now, and she knew she was running out of time. One wrong move, and he would have her. Hannah finally slowed, panting, her body exhausted. The forest gave way to a small clearing, a brief respite. Her legs ached, and her chest burned from the effort. She collapsed to her knees, her mind racing. The silence was overwhelming. She could hear the wind, feel the cold bite at her skin, but the forest's oppressive weight had lifted for a moment. Varek was close, but for now, she was safe. Hannah looked up at the sky, trying to steady her breath. Was there any way to turn this around? Was there a chance she could escape this fate? The moon was bright above, and a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves. It felt like nature itself was whispering a warning. Something was coming. Hannah knew she didn't have much time. She had to keep moving. The silence was shattered by the sound of footsteps. Varek was here. His presence was overwhelming, filling the clearing with a suffocating tension. Hannah's heart pounded in her chest as she turned to face him. He stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, as though savoring her fear. "You think you can outrun me, Hannah?" His voice was low, almost a growl. "There's nowhere you can hide from me. I've already won." She stood, the magic between them thrumming in the air, heavy and powerful. Varek's dark eyes locked onto hers. The distance between them closed with each step he took. Hannah's chest tightened. She wanted to fight, but the weight of their bond made it nearly impossible to act. Would she ever be free? His lips twisted into a cruel smile, as though reading her thoughts. "You're mine, whether you like it or not." The tension was unbearable, the stillness of the night shattered by Varek's words. But then, a figure emerged from the shadows. An older man wearing a cloak of dark fabric, his face hidden beneath the hood. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. The figure stepped forward, his presence calming but heavy with knowledge. "That's enough, Varek," the figure's voice rang out, calm and strong. "She's not yours to claim just yet." Varek's gaze flicked to the figure, and for the first time there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You, of all people, dare interfere?" The man did not flinch. "She's more than you think. You cannot control her fate." Hannah felt a flicker of hope. Could this man be an ally, or was he just another player in the dangerous game Varek had set into motion? Hannah turned to the old man, a mix of suspicion and relief flooding her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's gaze softened, and he stepped closer. "I've been watching over you for some time, Hannah. Varek is not the only one with power here. You have more within you than you know." Hannah felt a strange pull towards him, but doubt lingered in her chest. Could she trust him? Could she trust him? After everything she had endured, was she ready to place her fate in someone else's hands? The magic that had bound her to Varek pulsed in her veins, urging her to act, to fight back. The old man's eyes narrowed. "There's no time to explain everything, but you must choose, Hannah. Will you fight for your freedom, or remain under Varek's control?" The night was calm, too calm. Hannah stood by the edge of the river, the soft murmur of water blending with the distant hum of the forest. It should have been peaceful, but the unease lingered, crawling beneath her skin. Her thoughts kept returning to the man who was never far from her mind, Varek. She had managed to escape for now. But there was something in the air, something off about the stillness. She heard a twig snap, and her heart skipped. Turning sharply, she saw a figure step out of the shadows. Someone new. He was tall, his face shadowed by a cloak, but there was something in his presence that felt reassuring. "Hannah, I'm here to help," the stranger said, his voice low and steady. But as he spoke, there was a flicker in his eyes, a hesitation, as though he wasn't entirely sure of his own words. She frowned, unsure of how to react. He was offering assistance, but something didn't sit right. His calm was unsettling, like a carefully constructed facade. Was he truly here to help, or was he hiding something? As the stranger approached, Hannah instinctively took a step back. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her feel both safe and deeply unsettled. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nervous tremor in her chest. "I'm someone who knows what Varek is capable of," the man replied, his tone sincere but tinged with a strange sadness. "I've been tracking his movements for years. You can't outrun him alone, but together, maybe we can stop him." Hannah studied him, trying to find a reason not to trust him, but he seemed honest, even though a part of her was screaming that this was too easy. She wanted to believe that there was still hope, that not everything was lost. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment it felt like a genuine connection, a shared understanding. But behind his calm demeanor, there was a hint of something deeper, something hidden. The man's words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of something more. Hannah couldn't help but wonder if she was being manipulated again, just like she had been by Varek. "You think you can stop him?" she asked, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. "How do I know you're not just another part of his plan?" The man's expression darkened slightly, and he took a step back. "I'm not him, Hannah. I'm trying to prevent the same fate from befalling you that happened to me." She studied him closely, her mind racing. "What happened to you?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. The man's eyes flickered with a fleeting emotion, something painful. I was once like you, caught in his web of lies. But I broke free. I know how it feels to think you have no choice, but you do. His words stung, his bitterness a mirror of her own inner turmoil. But could he be trusted? Or was he just another lie? The betrayal came with a suddenness that Hannah couldn't comprehend. One moment she was listening to the man's warnings. The next, she felt the sharp sting of cold steel pressed against her neck. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "I'm sorry, Hannah," the man whispered, his voice barely audible in the still night. "But this is the only way to make sure Varek doesn't win." Shock radiated through her. The man she had trusted, the one who had promised to help her, had just turned on her. The knife was cold against her skin, and her world tilted. Was this the game Varek had been playing all along? Had she been led into another trap? Her hands trembled as she tried to move, but he pressed the blade harder, the edge sharp enough to draw blood. "I can't let you escape," he murmured, his tone regretful but firm. "You were never meant to be free." The world seemed to slow down as Hannah processed what had just happened. The man's betrayal cut deeper than she expected. It wasn't just the physical wound. It was the emotional one, the realization that trust had been broken once again. She collapsed to the ground, her hands shaking, the weight of it all crashing down on her. She had been manipulated, used, and now she was left alone, abandoned by the very person who had promised to help. For a long time, she sat there in the cold, her mind swirling with thoughts of revenge. She couldn't let this happen again. She wouldn't let it. Hannah stood, her resolve hardening. Varek had broken her once. This time it would be different. She would make sure of it. The silence after the betrayal felt heavier than the storm clouds that loomed overhead. Hannah sat alone in the forest clearing, the weight of what had happened pressing down on her chest. Her breath came in shallow and even gasps. The forest, once a place of refuge, now felt like a prison. The shadows too dark, the air too still. She could feel Varek's presence in the silence, a constant, oppressive force. But it wasn't just his looming figure that haunted her. It was the truth that had begun to surface. Every part of her screamed to run, to hide, but there was no escaping what she now knew. She had been blind to the true nature of the world around her, and now the pieces began to fit together. The illusions of safety, the promises made by strangers, they were all part of a game far bigger than she had imagined. Her hands trembled as she reached up to touch the scar on her neck, a mark of the magic that had bound her. The realization hit her hard. This wasn't just about survival. It was about a fight for control, for freedom. And she had just taken the first step in seeing through the lies. The memory came crashing in, sharp and unforgiving. Hannah remembered the first time she met Varek, the promises of safety, of power, of a life free from the fear that had plagued her for so long. It all seemed so real then, but now, standing in the dark, the truth felt like a cold slap to the face. She could still see his face, the way he'd looked at her when he'd first said, "You have a purpose." His words had been comforting then, but now they felt like a trap closing around her. She had believed every word. And then the memories began to flood in, the small details she had ignored. The way Varek would disappear for hours, the way he would speak of things that didn't make sense, the strange power he exuded. It was all part of his plan, and she had walked straight into it. The truth twisted in her chest. She had been a pawn, manipulated from the very beginning. The confrontation was inevitable. Hannah walked back to the clearing, where the shadow of Varek loomed. His presence was all-consuming, like the weight of the storm before it broke. "You knew," Hannah said, her voice quiet but steady. "You knew from the start." Varek didn't deny it. He simply stood there, the silence between them stretching into eternity. His eyes were cold, unfeeling. "I gave you a chance," he replied, his voice emotionless. "You were always going to learn the truth eventually. And now, you are. Hannah's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but her body didn't move. The shock of the revelation ran deep, but she wasn't going to back down. "I've seen the truth now," she said, her voice low and firm. "And you'll never control me again." For the first time, Varek seemed to pause, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. The power between them had shifted, just a little. Varek stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You still don't understand, do you?" he asked, his voice low but laced with a cold conviction. "You were never meant to be free. You were always a part of the plan." The words hung in the air like poison, seeping into Hannah's mind. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, though deep down she already knew. "You were never just a victim. You are the key. You were meant to open the door to everything. To me." His eyes locked with hers, and for a moment Hannah saw the full extent of his ambition. "You were the one who would help me take control," he continued, his voice steady and self-assured. "Everything you've done, every move you've made, it was all part of my design." The truth shattered her. All her pain, all the suffering she had endured, it had all been for his gain. She couldn't breathe. Was she a pawn in a game that had already been decided before her birth? Hannah stood motionless, the world spinning around her. The truth felt like a dark wave crashing over her, pulling her under. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. "So this was the truth all along," she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible. The realization settled in, deep and painful. The betrayal wasn't just by Varek, it was by the very world she had trusted. The bitterness of the moment was overwhelming, but Hannah felt something else too. A spark, the first true glimmer of clarity. She was no longer just a victim. The weight of the magic, the manipulation, it no longer held the same power over her. The world wasn't what she thought, and neither was she. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she raised her head. The storm inside her was just beginning. The journey to reclaim herself wasn't over yet, it had only just begun. The air was thick with tension, every breath heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. Hannah's footsteps echoed in the silent hall, each step a countdown to the moment of truth. The walls seemed to close in on her, the darkness pushing her forward. Her heart raced as the flickering torchlight cast long shadows on the cold stone floor. She could hear his voice now, cold and steady, rising from the shadows. "I've been waiting for this moment," Varek said, his voice a low growl that sent a chill down her spine. Hannah's hands clenched at her sides, but she didn't stop walking. The space between them closed, but it felt like miles. The world was silent, except for the pounding of her heart, the whispers of the past swirling in her mind. This was it. The moment where everything would change. She couldn't hesitate. The time for running was over. When Hannah finally reached him, the world seemed to pause. For a moment, she thought she saw something in Varek's eyes, something that resembled doubt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his cold determination. "You don't have to do this," Hannah said, her voice trembling but steady. "This isn't you." Varek chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "You've always believed that," he said, his eyes flashing with bitterness. "But you never understood. I never had a choice." Hannah flinched at his words, the weight of them settling deep in her chest. "We all have a choice," she whispered. "Even you." But Varek's smile only widened, and his hand moved to his side, where a blade gleamed in the dim light. "Or learn the hard way." The first strike came too quickly, a flash of steel cutting through the air. Hannah barely managed to dodge, the blade grazing her arm. Pain shot through her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Then, out of nowhere, the sound of a body hitting the floor echoed behind her. She turned in shock to see the old man, the one who had promised to help her, lying motionless, a dagger lodged in his chest. "No!" Hannah screamed, rushing to his side. He was still breathing, but the blood pouring from the wound stained the stone beneath them. His hand reached up weakly, grasping hers. "Hannah, this was always your fight," he whispered, his voice faint. "Don't let it end here." His words were broken by a final breath. The weight of his sacrifice crashed into her chest, and she felt the heat of her rage ignite. She wasn't going to let this be in vain. Hannah's heart raced as she faced Varek again, her body trembling with fury. The truth was clear now more than ever. Varek had been manipulating her from the start, using her for his own gain, and she had let him. "I won't let you do this anymore," she said, her voice low and steady. "I won't be your pawn." Varek laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "You never were. You were always my weapon. You were always meant to help me take control." The words hit her like a slap. But there was no turning back now. Hannah raised her hand, a surge of magic coursing through her veins. She had no more hesitation. The fight had already begun. In one swift motion, she sent a burst of energy toward Varek, the force knocking him back against the stone wall. He grinned, but his eyes were filled with something new: fear. "You've made a mistake," he said, his voice tight with rage. Hannah stood over Varek, breathing heavily, her body covered in sweat and blood. The battle had taken everything out of her, but she could feel the strength she had gained from within. The storm outside raged, the wind howling through the cracks in the stone. But it no longer mattered. She had won, but it came at a great cost. She had lost someone she trusted, and she had almost lost herself. But now, there was nothing left to hold her back. Varek was broken, his power shattered. The world was different, and so was she. Her heart still ached, but the pain was no longer a weight. It was a part of her, something that had forged her into the person she had become. She turned, her eyes steady and her posture unwavering. It was over, and yet, in some ways, it was just beginning. The smoke from the battle still hung in the air, thick and acrid, but slowly it began to dissipate. Hannah stood alone in the clearing, her breath heavy and ragged, as the world around her returned to a silence that felt endless. The wind had calmed, and the faintest light of dawn stretched across the horizon, casting soft hues of orange and pink across the blood-stained earth. Her body ached from the fight, her skin marked with the remnants of her struggle. Her mind, however, was still caught in the chaos of the past few days. She had won, but at what cost? The loss felt hollow, the victory incomplete. There was no rejoicing, only the quiet, aching realization of what she had endured and what had been taken from her. The world was still, too still. The calm after the storm only deepened the weight of her grief. What was left for her now? The pieces of her life had shattered, and she was left with nothing but the quiet aftermath. Hannah sat by the riverbank, her fingers tracing the edge of the water, her thoughts drifting. The past few days felt like a blur of pain and rage, of betrayal and loss. But now, in the stillness of the moment, the truth began to settle in. The faces of those she had lost flashed before her eyes. The old man's final words echoed in her mind. He had known what was coming, had seen the path laid out for her long before she had. She had fought for so long, for survival, for justice. But now, all she could feel was the emptiness that followed. The people who had been her allies, the ones she had trusted, they were gone. The grief pressed down on her chest, but with it came something else, a quiet understanding. The world had changed, and so had she. There was no going back. The future stretched before her, uncertain but possible. There was still so much left to do, but she couldn't help but wonder, was there room for healing in a world that had seen so much destruction? A sudden rustling in the trees brought Hannah to her feet, her body still tense from the battle's aftermath. Out of the shadows stepped the figure she had not expected to see again. Michael, his clothes torn, his body battered, limped toward her, his face weary but alive. She had thought him lost forever, but here he was, standing before her, the faintest smile on his lips. "I thought I'd lost you," Hannah whispered, her voice barely audible. Her heart surged as she reached out to him. "Not yet," Michael replied, his voice raspy but strong. "We both have a lot to rebuild." His presence, though weak, felt like a lifeline, one she hadn't realized she needed until this moment. His smile, though faint, was all she needed to know that not everything was lost. They had both survived, and somehow that was enough for now. As the sun rose higher, Hannah stood beside Michael, her thoughts turning to the lessons she had learned. The old man's words still echoed in her mind. There is no true freedom without sacrifice. She could feel the weight of those words pressing on her, but now they made sense. The road to redemption, to rebuilding, would be long and filled with more challenges, but it was a road she had to walk. There would be no more hiding, no more running. She remembered the old man's final message. "You will find your strength in what remains, Hannah, not in what's been lost." The truth of it settled into her bones, grounding her. She took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs. The storm had passed, but the work ahead was just beginning. The world was broken, but there was still hope, and that was enough. Hannah turned away from the river, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. The world, it seemed, was beginning to heal, but so was she. She had learned to face the pain, to accept the losses, and to move forward with the knowledge that the journey was far from over. With Michael by her side, she felt a small flicker of hope for the future. They had both survived the storm, and now they would rebuild. "Let's go," Hannah said, her voice calm but resolute. "There's much to be done." And with that, she took her first step into the new world she would help create, one step at a time. The silence after the storm felt endless. The world seemed to hold its breath as Hannah stood in the empty clearing, the remnants of her battle still lingering in the air like smoke. The wind had settled, but the heaviness of loss still hung in the air. Her eyes moved across the desolate landscape, the faces of those lost to this fight flickering in her memory. Varek, the old man, all of them, gone. And yet they remained in the spaces between the trees, in the stillness of the morning air. The ground beneath her feet was damp, as though even the earth mourned the weight of the past. But in that stillness, a quiet understanding began to settle within her. What had been lost could never be replaced, but what remained was her to rebuild. The question lingered in her mind, was it worth it? Hannah walked slowly, her footsteps soft against the earth. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the world pressing down on her. The past was gone, but it would always be a part of her. The future, though uncertain, was now in her hands. She glanced back one last time at the clearing, the place where everything had changed. There was no going back, no undoing the destruction. But there was a future to build, a new path to carve through the remnants of the old world. The choice was hers now. The power, the responsibility, it was hers to shape. A voice echoed in the silence, a faint whisper of a memory. "You were always meant to lead, Hannah," the old man's voice seemed to say, though he was gone. His words, once heavy with truth, now felt like a guidepost in the fog. Hannah paused for a moment, the memory of his face, his final words, filling the space around her. "Find your strength in what remains," he had said. Those words echoed in her heart now more than ever. She understood them now. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. The world had broken, but she would rebuild. The future was hers to define. The world moved on. The day was new, and with it came new faces, new beginnings. Hannah watched as the people of the village she had once called home began to rebuild, their hands working together in quiet unity. The rhythm of life returned slowly, but surely. She could feel it in the air, in the way the earth seemed to hum beneath her feet. Time was passing, and the world was healing, just as she was. A small smile played at her lips as she watched Michael and others move through the village, their work steady and their spirits determined. The pain of the past would always linger, but it no longer had the same power over her. Hannah stood at the edge of the river once more, the world around her still and peaceful. The journey had been long, the cost high, but she had found something within herself. She never expected a quiet strength, a resolve to move forward. She turned her gaze to the water, the flow of it steady and constant. The world was never truly still, she realized. It was always moving, always changing. But sometimes, peace could only be found in the quiet moments in between. "There's no going back," she whispered to herself, the weight of the truth settling in. "But I will keep moving forward."